There are moments in life when everything seems to fall apart, when the ground beneath you shakes, and the life you built feels like sand slipping through your fingers. We may lose money, status, or even someone we love most. In those moments, we look back, clutching memories, hoping somehow the past will return. But this story isn't about what's lost. It's about why healing begins only when you take one step forward, even the smallest one. In a quiet, unassuming town lived a young man named David. He was known for his drive, his restless ambition, and the fire in his eyes. From a young age, David believed that hard work could break every barrier. If you gave enough of yourself, sleepless nights, endless effort, sacrifices beyond measure, nothing was impossible. And so, he began. David started a business from scratch, and every brick, every plan, every deal was a piece of himself. Days blurred into nights, weeks into months. He sacrificed sleep, friendships, and comforts for the dream. For a time, it worked. His name carried weight. People listened when he spoke. His vision seemed unstoppable. But life, as it often does, has a fragile side. Success, no matter how dazzling, can crumble in a storm. A few missteps, a misplaced trust, a partner's betrayal, and suddenly, the opportunities that once seemed endless vanished. The empire David had built didn't collapse overnight. It eroded slowly, painfully, until all that remained was a ghost of the life he once knew. And here is life's first harsh lesson. Effort is never wasted, but it does not make you invincible. No matter how hard you try, some things lie beyond control. David's business crumbled. People who once celebrated his rise now whispered about his fall. Streets that once echoed with admiration now felt like courtrooms. Every passerby a silent judge. Another truth, often discovered too late. The world rarely remembers how hard you tried. It remembers where you fell, and David fell hard. Yet, he refused to let go. Each morning, he walked past his old office building. The sign that once bore his company's name was gone, replaced by a new one, yet he lingered. He stared at the doors as though they might open, as if the life he lost could return just by looking long enough. In his mind, he replayed the past. The sound of phones ringing, employees laughing, deals being made. Memories felt louder than the present. Isn't that what we all do, in a way? We linger in the ruins of what was, thinking they might rebuild themselves, forgetting that ruins never reconstruct, they only remind you of what's gone. At night, David sat alone with old files, contracts, and business plans. Numbers that no longer mattered, opportunities that would never return. He searched for mistakes, for that single decision that ruined everything. But no matter how long he looked, the past did not answer. Reflection can teach, but it cannot rescue. Still, David clung to it. Inside, he whispered to himself, "Maybe I can fix it. Maybe I can start again here." But deep down, he knew the truth. What broke him was not what would heal him. David had become a man at war with himself. By day, he wandered the town with his head low, a shadow of the man he once was. By night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trapped in thoughts that spun endlessly around one harsh truth. He had failed. Failure has a voice, and it is cruel. It whispers in the silence of your mind, "You are not enough. You ruined everything. You will never rise again." This is the hidden cruelty of failure. It doesn't just take what you've built, it tries to steal who you are. David began avoiding people. Friends who once cheered his victories now reminded him of loss. Handshakes felt heavy with pity. Smiles seemed false. He spent his hours alone, chained to what-ifs. What if I hadn't trusted him? What if I'd made a different decision? What if I walked away sooner? But what if is a prison. It traps you in a past that cannot be changed, while life moves forward without you. One morning, as David wandered near the edge of town, he noticed a small shop. The owner, an older man, was sweeping steps, whistling softly. David paused, watching. The shop was modest, ordinary, Yet the man carried himself with peace. David wondered, how could someone with so little seem happier than him, who once had so much? Here lies another quiet truth. Peace is not found in what you own, but in what you choose to carry. Days passed, and David kept walking familiar paths, the old office, the cafes where deals were struck, the streets lined with memories. He avoided new paths, clinging to what was known. And this is a trap many of us fall into. Familiarity comforts, but it also chains. One afternoon, David stood before his old office again. A young man, passing by, asked, "Why do you always come here?" David, caught off guard, shrugged. "This place, it used to be mine." The boy looked at him, eyes clear, and said, "If it broke you, why do you keep standing in it?" Simple words, sharp as a blade. David felt them cut deep. Often, truth does not come from the wise or the expected. It comes from the unexpected. That night, David could not sleep. The boy's words echoed. Why do you keep standing in it? Anger rose first. Who did this boy think he was, telling him what to do? But beneath anger, there was silence. And in that silence, truth. He had stood in the place where he was broken, waiting for it to heal him. But broken places do not heal. They hold scars. And that is the hard truth. Life does not repair you where it broke you. Healing requires movement. Healing demands that you move forward. Yet, David was not ready. He tried small steps sitting at his desk, notebook open, attempting new ideas, but fear gripped him. What if I fail again? What if people laugh at me? What if I am truly not enough? Fear is cunning. It convinces you that staying stuck is safer than moving forward. So, David closed the notebook, returned to old files, old memories, the ruins of what was. He was alive, but not living, breathing, but not moving. And isn't this the danger for many of us? To exist in yesterday, while the future waits untouched. One evening, rain fell hard across the town. David stood under the roof of a closed shop, watching the water hit the streets. People rushed by, moving forward despite the storm. But he stayed rooted, frozen, and for the first time, he admitted the truth aloud. I am not moving. I am stuck. And that, strangely, was the turning point. Healing does not begin when you are strong. It begins when you are honest. You cannot rise until you admit that you have stopped walking. The rain ceased, but David stayed under the shop roof, staring at the empty streets. For the first time, he said to himself, I am stuck. And here is the truth many never reach. Healing begins the moment you stop pretending. As long as you hide behind excuses, progress cannot find you. At this point, David's journey is only beginning. The battle inside him is raw, real, and painfully human. What he will discover next is the small, seemingly insignificant step that can change everything. But that step requires courage, humility, and the willingness to leave the ruins behind. The next morning, David found himself standing at the gate of his old neighborhood. For months, he had avoided people, avoided conversations, avoided life itself. But now, a quiet resolve stirred within him. Not the loud, confident fire of ambition from before, but a gentle, steady spark that whispered, maybe, just maybe, it's time to move forward. David walked to the house of his old neighbor, Mr. Elas, a retired teacher known for his wisdom. Elas was sitting outside, hands deep in the soil of his small garden, tending to flowers that seemed as old as the man himself. His face was calm, lined with years, but there was peace in his eyes, a peace David had not felt in a long time. I don't know why I'm here, David muttered, lowering himself onto the bench beside the man. Elas didn't look up immediately. He continued pressing soil around a delicate flower, then glanced at David and said softly, sometimes you don't come because you know, you come because you're lost. David's voice was heavy, tinged with shame. I failed. I built something I thought would last forever, and it collapsed. I can't let go. I keep going back. Elas leaned on his cane and looked at him with sharp clarity. "Tell me, David, if a glass shatters in your hand, do you keep holding it, hoping the pieces will fit again? Or do you let it go before it cuts you deeper?" David stared at the ground, the answer clear, yet the weight of resistance still pressed on his chest. He wanted to cling to what was broken, even if it hurt him. Elas continued, voice calm but firm. "That office, that business, that name it broke, you're still holding the pieces. And until you let go, you will keep bleeding." In that moment, something shifted inside David. He realized what he had been avoiding for months. Holding on to broken places does not revive them. It only keeps the wound open. "But if I let go, what do I have left?" David whispered. Elas smiled faintly, eyes gentle. "You have yourself. And that is where rebuilding begins." The lesson sank in slowly, like the first rays of dawn breaking over a dark night. David had tied his identity to a business, to a name, to a dream. But all that was external. What remained, even after the collapse, was himself. His character, his courage, his capacity to move forward. These were never lost. The days that followed were not easy. Letting go hurt. Every time David walked past the old office, memories clawed at him, urging him to look back. But he forced himself onto new streets, new paths, even if they were unfamiliar. Change, he realized, begins with small steps. Steps that feel awkward, steps that hurt, but steps that eventually lead forward. David cleaned his desk at home, throwing away stacks of contracts and balance sheets. Each page felt like a piece of his identity, but as they hit the trash, he felt lighter. For the first time, he understood something he hadn't before. Letting go is not weakness. It is making room for new strength. He began journaling, words spilling slowly at first, anger, regret, self-blame, but gradually, sentences of hope emerged. "I am still alive. I still have time. I can try again." Writing became his companion, a mirror to reflect not just what he had lost, but what he could still build. Then came the small steps of action. David started taking minor work again, helping local shopkeepers, advising younger men about their ventures. Pride whispered, "This is beneath you. You once led dozens. Now you serve in shadows." But David ignored it. And in those small acts, he discovered a hidden truth. Rebirth often begins in humility, not glory. Months passed. Through these small tasks, he regained discipline and clarity. The young men he mentored began to seek his guidance, not because he was a man who had once succeeded, but because he was now a man who understood failure, resilience, and growth. Opportunity, David realized, rarely announces itself. It hides in plain sight, in gaps others overlook, in problems no one has solved. He saw a need in the town that no one had addressed. He sketched plans, considered risks, and slowly, carefully, began to build again. But this time, he built differently. Gone was the hunger for applause or status. Gone was the need to prove himself to the world. Now, he focused on sustainability, strength, and purpose. Because failure had taught him that success without wisdom collapses, but success built on lessons endures. The new venture started modestly. A rented office, a handful of workers, a trickle of clients, but it grew steadily, rooted like young trees that eventually become forests. And David felt the fire return. But this fire was different. It was tempered by patience, humility, and a quiet understanding that his worth was never in the height of his success, but in the depth of his character. He no longer viewed success as a measure of his value. It was a tool, a way to create, to serve, to leave a mark without losing himself. The transformation was subtle but profound. David's story was no longer about the rise and fall of a business. It was about the rise of a man who had learned to bend, adapt, and grow without breaking entirely. People in the town began to notice. They no longer whispered about his failure. They spoke of his resilience, his willingness to guide others, his ability to rebuild not with ego, but with understanding. Children were told stories of David, not as a man who fell, but as a man who rose, again and again. And David himself understood something he had never realized. His story was never about the fall. The collapse was a chapter, a lesson. The rise was the real story. He stood in his office one evening, watching the sunset spill gold over the rooftops. The air felt lighter, his chest no longer heavy. He carried scars, yes, but now they were symbols, not burdens. They reminded him of where he had been, of the pain endured, and of the strength discovered along the way. For the first time in years, he whispered with certainty, "I am not what I lost. I am what I chose to rebuild." But even as David rebuilt, he understood the broader lesson of life. All of us, in some way, face moments when the world collapses around us. Failures, losses, betrayals. In those moments, the choice is the same: remain in the ruins or step forward, even when fear grips tight. Healing, he realized, is not a destination. It is a series of steps, small, consistent, sometimes painful, but always moving forward. The moments of despair are not signs of weakness, they are the soil in which growth takes root. David's journey was not just about business, it was about character, about understanding that humility, discipline, and service often outweigh ambition, ego, and haste. About recognizing that scars are proof of survival, not shame, and that the worth of a man is never in what he owns, but in who he becomes. Yet, even as he grew stronger, David never forgot the early lessons of loss, the betrayal, the empty office, the whispers of judgment. They remained, etched in memory, but no longer as chains. They were reminders that the past shapes, but does not define, the future. And so, life continued. David walked new streets, met new people, helped the young, mentored those who sought guidance, and built a venture not for applause, but for purpose. Small victories became momentum. Lessons learned became pillars. And slowly, the man who once stood frozen in the ruins became a man who moved confidently toward tomorrow. But the journey was not yet complete. There remained one final truth David had to understand: that the greatest measure of success is not what others see, but the peace within. True achievement is not the noise of admiration, but the quiet of fulfillment. And only those willing to rise from their broken places can ever truly reach it. David's story is a mirror for us all. It shows that falling is inevitable, but remaining down is optional. The first steps forward, small as they may seem, are the beginning of everything. And sometimes, those steps come not from grand decisions, but from moments of honesty, humility, and courage. David learned that day by day, choice by choice, he could rebuild, not as the man he was, but as the man he was meant to become. As months turned into years, David's life continued to shift, not in sudden leaps, but in steady, deliberate steps. Every morning he woke with intention, no longer weighed down by the ruins of his past. His new venture, built on purpose rather than pride, continued to grow. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't immediately celebrated, but it endured. And that endurance brought a satisfaction David had never felt before, a quiet, steady fulfillment that outshone any applause he had once chased. David had discovered a profound truth. Success built without wisdom collapses, but success guided by lessons endures. He had learned to see opportunity where others overlooked it, to value patience over haste, and to measure his worth by his character rather than external achievements. The scars of his past, the betrayal, the collapse, the sleepless nights no longer haunted him. They were proof that he had survived, that he had endured, and that he had risen stronger than before. He began mentoring more young people in the town, not just in business, but in life. His guidance came not from theory, but from experience. He shared the hard truths he had learned, that life is fragile, failure inevitable, but resilience within reach. The younger men looked up to him, not because of wealth or titles, but because of his authenticity, his humility, and the lessons etched in his life. David's transformation was also personal. He cultivated peace within himself, understanding that true happiness is not found in external validation, but in living according to your values. He no longer needed the world to acknowledge his worth, he carried it within. And it was in this inner strength that he found freedom. One evening, as he stood in his office watching the sun dip below the horizon, David reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the empty streets, the whispers of judgment, the heavy silence that once consumed him. He remembered Mr. Elas and the young boy who had asked the question that cut to his core. If it broke you, why do you keep standing in it? The memories no longer brought pain, they brought clarity. Every fall, every moment of despair had led him to the understanding that healing begins only when you stop clinging to what is gone. The ruins of the past are not prisons, they are teachers, and he had finally learned their lessons. David whispered quietly to himself, not with doubt, but with certainty. I am not what I lost. I am what I chose to rebuild. And this, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all. Life will break us, yes. It will test our patience, our courage, and our belief in ourselves. But it also gives us a choice to remain where we fell, or to rise, rebuild, and move forward with wisdom, humility, and resilience. The town itself began to notice the change. People no longer spoke of David as the man who fell. They spoke of him as the man who rose. They shared his story with their children, not as a cautionary tale of failure, but as a testament to human resilience. David's journey became a quiet legend, a source of inspiration, and while David had rebuilt a business, regained trust, and found purpose, he also discovered something far greater: the joy of service. He learned that true success is not about proving yourself to the world, but about creating value, helping others, and living in alignment with your principles. This was the transformation that no collapse could take from him, the transformation of the heart and mind. As his second venture grew steadily, David finally understood that the applause of the world is temporary, but the impact you create lasts. The guidance he offered to young people, the support he gave to local shopkeepers, the small acts of kindness and mentorship, they were the roots that anchored him to lasting fulfillment. David's story, however, extends beyond his personal triumph. It is a story for all of us. Each of us, in one way or another, faces moments where life breaks us. Moments of failure, betrayal, loss, or rejection. In those moments, we are confronted with the same choice David faced. Do we stay where we fell, or do we rise and rebuild? The lessons from his journey are clear. First, don't remain where you were broken. The instinct may be to cling to the pieces, but broken places do not heal. They only remind you of what is gone. Healing begins the moment you move forward, even if it is just a small step. Second, small steps create profound transformations. David did not rebuild in a day. It began with small actions, new paths, helping others, journaling, taking minor work. Each step may have seemed insignificant, yet together, they became the foundation for lasting growth. Third, humility is the seed of rebirth. Pride told David he was too important for small beginnings, but when he embraced humility, he rediscovered purpose. Rebirth rarely begins in glory. It begins in small, patient, disciplined efforts. Fourth, failure is a teacher, not a verdict. The collapse of David's first business was not the end. It was a classroom that taught him how to build stronger the second time. Failure is tuition for wisdom, and the lessons it offers are priceless. Fifth, scars are proof of survival. David's scars from betrayal and loss were no longer wounds. They were reminders of what he had endured and overcome. They became a testament to resilience, not shame. Sixth, your worth is greater than your losses. For too long, David tied his identity to what he owned and what he had built. When it all collapsed, he feared he had collapsed too. But he learned that true worth lies in character, courage, and the choice to rebuild. Seventh, true success is measured by service, not shine. His second venture was not about accolades or recognition. It was about impact, value, and contributing to the lives of others. Success that serves endures longer than success that merely dazzles. Finally, the end of a chapter is not the end of the book. David's first collapse felt like the conclusion of his story, yet it was only a chapter. Every ending is a doorway to a new beginning, and every setback carries the seed of a greater rise. Wherever you are right now, standing in ruins, facing loss, or wrestling with failure, remember David's story. Don't stay where you were broken. Don't wait for the past to return. Don't mistake scars for chains. Life has more in store for you than you realize. The story is not finished. The page is not closed. Like David, you have the power to rise, to rebuild, and to create a future greater than your past could ever contain. You are stronger than your failures, bigger than your pain, and the best chapters of your life may still be unwritten. David's journey reminds us, falling is inevitable, but rising is a choice. Healing is a process. Small steps at a time. Humility and service build the foundation for enduring success. Scars do not define weakness, they define survival. And your worth is never in what you lost, but in what you choose to rebuild. He stands in his new office one evening, looking out at the sunset, chest light, heart full. He knows he carries scars, but they no longer ache. They remind him only of where he's been and how far he's come. And quietly, with certainty, he whispers, "I am not what I lost. I am what I chose to rebuild." This story is not just David's, it is ours. Each time life breaks us, each time we feel lost or defeated, we are faced with the same choice. Will we stay in the ruins, or will we rise and rebuild? Your journey, like David's, begins the moment you take that first step forward. One step, then another. And slowly, those steps will carry you to a place stronger, wiser, and more alive than you ever imagined. And with that, thanks for watching. And until next time,